everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay,
Morning.
it looks like we are streaming in and live and have lots of faces sharing in the conversation with us today. I am so excited, and I just want to thank everyone on behalf of all of the partners who brought this together today for joining us. We know that this is a critical time in public health across the country, but certainly in South Carolina. And, you know, we have all been in many conversations about the disparities in vaccination rates, especially within the African American community. So my colleagues and I who have, you know, been a part of these conversations sort of applied the Dan and Chip Heath strategy, which for those of you who are familiar, it talks about finding bright spots. So if you want to make change, you go in search of things that are working well, and you do more of that. And so that is what our conversation is about today. We know there are many, many bright spots across the state of people who are doing amazing work, certainly around what we have identified as knowledge, trust, and access. And those are three really important components in reaching specifically the African American community around vaccinations. And we wanted to make sure that we were lifting up leaders from within the community who were doing great work and find opportunities to partner and advance that. So without further ado, our first pair of speakers are two people who I have had the honor of working with through previous partnerships with the census. So we have Brenda Murphy, who is the state conference president of the South Carolina NAACP. She has dedicated her life to service both in nursing and providing leadership through the NAACP. She is an adjunct professor and has worked at the University of South Carolina, MUSC, SC State, and provides leadership in our healthcare community as well. And she is joined by Marvin Neal. He is the chapter president for Georgetown County. He is an employee of Santee Cooper and a great leader in his community. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Brenda and Neal to share about their work in vaccinations across the state. Brenda?
Good morning. It is indeed a privilege to be able to sit before you this morning and share with you some of our, our initiative, the major initiative that relates to COVID-19 and what we've done to try to ensure that people of color receive the vaccine. As all of you know, a greater percentage of people of color have died because of this pandemic in significant numbers. Family members, several in one family, in a number of families that I know have passed because of this virus that's so devastating to many. We decided, and this was as a result of some of our work that we did with the census, we decided to again concentrate on the rural areas where we knew that access to care was somewhat challenging because of the limited number of health care providers in those areas, as well as the limited education about the need to take the vaccine. Therefore, we decided that we would prepare all of our presidents throughout the state with the information that they needed to get back to their communities to encourage everyone in their communities to take the vaccine. Of course, that has been challenging for a number of reasons. It took, number one being access to those areas was very limited in the beginning when the vaccine was first available to be given to individuals. So it resulted in the rural areas being served much later. As a matter of fact, some of them still being served now. We, as an organization, first thought that our advocacy work would be enough. And so we decided after a while, we needed to do more. So we decided to contact DHEC to let them know what our challenges were in terms of access to care in these counties. And actually, we identified 37 counties with areas that were in need of access to the vaccine. And that's 37 out of 46. So that's quite a number there. But I think we met the challenge in terms of at least making DHEC aware that they needed to do more and make sure that those communities had access to the vaccine. We are not where we need to be. We are doing better in some areas than others. And I will let President Neal talk to you a little bit about what he's done in his county in order to make that availability to many. And I think Georgetown probably is, I know it is, the county that has the greatest number of individuals served, people of color, in our state. So I will let him share that with you later. But we are still encouraging our communities to take the vaccine. Those members of the community, we've had some challenges, especially since the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was paused for a while, because that was actually vaccine of choice by those residents living in rural areas. But now we are trying to encourage them to take what's available. And that, as I said, is going to be a challenge. Mr. Neal, I'll let you share information regarding the Georgetown experience.
Oh, Marvin, you're on mute.
Again, good morning. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this opportunity, and thank President Murphy for her great leadership. She's sterling leadership for the NAACP South Carolina. And she's really given us great guidance in the process. And we followed those guidance to the point where until we ran into challenges ourselves, and then we responded back. And some of the challenges we ran into was exactly what she said, with lack of broadband access, lack of cell phone tower, lack of transportation, lack of information about the vaccine, those type of issues. So some of the things that we have done here, we have went back out to the community, and we used the model. I think she mentioned it in her conversation, the Black to Vote, Black to Vac. And what that meant is to get back into the areas that we had a dire needs for the vaccine. So we went out and we started working with DHEC, and we collaborated with the different entities in the community and start setting up mobile sites and stuff of that nature. With the pastors of the churches, the different mobile units that we had accessible to us through the pharmacy in the area. We utilized our Thailand health system here and collaborated with them also with vouchers in hand and appointments. When we called someone, they would have an appointment when we spoke with them. So they won't have to go back through that process, trying to get on the line or trying to get internet access, which they had a lack of from the beginning. We also, we sent out letters to the churches and got the pastors involved to the point where they start giving us numbers that we need to bring to that area. So when we contact DHAC and those, they would have a number when they get there. And also once they got there, we still have challenges because still a lot of the vaccine still would needed to go online and stuff of that nature. So those that still could not get access, we had appointments in hand from Thailand to bridge that gap in that area. So collaboration with the local hospital and DHEC leading the charge are really closed the gap for us. And we still have some situations that we are dealing with right now, which we are utilizing a postcard mail out system and call banking that we utilized during the last election, in which we are working now and stuff and getting called back in and still getting those appointments set up. Our next move is to go into the community, door knocking, boots on the ground. And I must say, we have had also collaborated with a ride program, neighbor to neighbor, out of the Horry County area, which help us get those to the sites that did not have transportation and things of that nature. So all those things are working. We brought on several doctors. We utilize the food drives. We set up at the food drive sites. We set up appointments there. Every opportunity that we had that we recognized in our community, we had boots on the ground there with applications in hand and appointments in which we could go back and get them into the system and get them out to the different sites to get vaccinated. The encouraging part was we brought on, first of all, we brought on our President Murphy at the beginning of the vaccine season and just started building the encouragement to get people out. We start bringing on the medical doctors, Dr. McIver of Myrtle Beach, Conway area here, and a well-known doctor in the area, Black doctors. We brought on Dr. Harbin. He is the spokesperson for Thailand Health. We brought him on, and some of the different outreach persons from the hospital, just to talk about the vaccine and educating people. We also sent out flyers and clippings of blacks that was in the laboratory that discovered the vaccine, to get rid of some of the Tuskegee experiment information that was coming out, and that was huge. And we got a lot of feedback on that, people just thanking us just for letting them know that, because a lot of them still had that mindset that the vaccine came out too fast for them. But from a chemistry standpoint, because I worked in the chemistry lab at Santee Cooper, and I had to help them realize that we're not on the horse and buggies anymore. We are driving now. So things are faster. So we have to actually speak that language to those and bridge that gap in the mindset, and we also have to remind them that the 500 plus people that died, is worth it to take the vaccine versus those that's still living and stuff. So the vaccine played a major role. So we start giving the numbers, how many died from the vaccine versus how many died from COVID-19. And those are the type of language that we have to continue to speak to them and have the pastors and leaders of the community to continue to speak to them. We also went in our last phase here just on last week. We stepped into the school system and started communicating with the superintendent of schools on the encouragement and the athletes and the sports directors, encouraging their players, just to talk about the season and the shortfall that they have had with, one person getting the COVID-19 that shut down their whole game for that day, and they have to wait out another 10 days. So it's a lot of opportunities still here to encourage, even that younger generation to get out and get the vaccine. So I'm going to stop there because I could go all day on stuff and things that we have in mind. But I just want to say there's much to do, and we still not out of the water, and we're going to work until that last day, until every arm that we could think of get a vaccine in it. I'll continue to encourage. So thank you for your time.
I'd just like to say we still have quite a few sites that we are going to and as hosts for the NAACP branches throughout the state of South Carolina. These are rural areas that we are trying to make sure that are served. And we just need to keep in mind that there have been greater than 9,000 deaths in our state due to this COVID vaccine. And when we look at reported deaths due to vaccines, we have to remind individuals that there have been none reported at this point. But we will continue to do what we can to make sure the shots are given in the arms of people of color in our communities. And we work collaboratively, as President Neal has stated. You know, we're going to churches. Many of the churches have agreed to be sites for administration of the vaccine. And also, we want to thank DHEC for the support that they've given us in this project.
So we have a question in the chat box, but I also wanted to mention, Marvin, you had talked yesterday about the importance of having both Tidelands Health and the NAACP on the education pieces. Can you all talk a little bit, and Brenda too, so a two-part question. One, about the importance of the partnership and using the credibility and trust of the NAACP. And then another question that came in the chat box, Brenda, you touched on this a little bit, but do you have specific areas, counties of the state that you guys are focused on that you still need support, you're still working? Can you tell us a couple of specific areas that you're targeting at this point?
Yes, there are quite a few. Lee County, Florence County, Colleton County, Hampton County, numerous counties that still need to be served, that need access to care. We are seeing some of the providers now come into some of those areas, but there still is the need for a significant number of individuals to be served. Some of the communities are very small. They may, we may capture a group of maybe 50, sometimes, of individuals that may need the vaccine. Sometimes it's a little challenging to get a provider to come in if there is a small number of people that may need the vaccine. So that is something that we're working on. But as I said, we are focusing in on 27 of our, actually 37 of our 46 counties. There's still a lot of work to be done. There are areas in each, we are approaching this using the regions that DHEC uses, and we still have areas in all of those regions that need to be served, that need access to the vaccine.
Mrs. Murphy, there's been one additional question that came in the chat box while you were speaking, and it is specifically if members of Black sororities and fraternities, Eastern Stars and Masons have been involved, or if y'all have been in contact with them.
Most definitely. We utilize all the sororities and fraternities. We also utilize a club named 142, which is a 500+ member club in Georgetown here, with a diverse background of our people that came on board and started doing phone banking and stuff of that nature and sending out postcards. But you also mentioned trust and the Tideland community. What we did, the Tideland, we have the nurse from Tideland itself is we brought them on board in this year here as our health committee chairperson for the NAACP, which was very useful to us and stuff. And she just volunteered, and Tideland, we stayed in communication. One thing we did not do, we did not dispel any positive notion, and we got rid of all of the negatives between whether Tideland is doing it or pointing fingers of that nature. We didn't talk about those things. We talk about what we could do together. And they maintained that attitude. And that's what really brought people back together when they started seeing the Black and brown faces on Facebook with us in our Streamline on Saturday. We had 84 episodes of just advertising from the NAACP from the time the vaccine, the COVID-19 came into the States there once we recognized. So we maximized and flooded the community with different faces on Spotlight, with doctors and Black doctors talking about underlying condition. Dr. Jackson out of MUSC, we had Dr. McIver, we had Dr. Harmon, I mean, and nurses just coming on and just talking about it and the importance, even from the point of pregnancy and the impact and the reason why you should get vaccine and things of that nature. So it's a win-win when it comes down to it. Even the alumni associations from the high schools, we brought them in. So trust, we have built that trust. We just have to now get into those areas where there's no telephone, there are elderlies, and we utilize the postcard system. We do mail outs from the zip code from the van voting. So we send out to those areas and they call us back on a Google line where we have 5 receptionists on that line that can pick up that call and attend to and give service to that. We also coordinated with 2 of the personal pharmacy here that agreed to go out when the opportunity comes to those that can't get out and bedridden and stuff of that nature. But we still have tons of work to do in those areas also. We had about 50%, but we need help. Because just from my standpoint, I average about $200 a week just on gas. So I know the impact now is getting greater, but yes, there's going to be more boots on the ground because we're dealing with the younger generation also. So and that's where we're working from.
And I like to address that from a state level as well. I know they've done very well in Georgetown, but you're going to see the same challenges throughout our state in terms of use of personal vehicles to transport those individuals that don't have transportation. Also, the question was asked about sororities, the Eastern Stars and Masons. Many of those individuals are members of the NAACP. So yes, we do use other organizations, even if they're not, even if somebody's not a member of the NAACP, we have partners with the different fraternities, sororities, nursing organizations. And so we have had these individuals to come and join us as need be. They also serve as a resource in the community in terms of helping us to identify areas that we can use as sites for the vaccine to be administered. As I said, we depend on the ministers as well. I'd just like to share with everyone that, we still have a lot to do. And right now, a lot of the individuals are doing it with their own personal vehicles, own personal funds, because we have limited resources in terms of to dedicate to this, but we believe that we have to make sure that the shots get into the arms of our brothers and sisters.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And what we will do for those of you who are listening in, we will provide a summary of the counties. I know there were a couple people who asked about locations. So we'll send out information about counties, activities, what resources are needed. So as a follow-up to this conversation with each of our panelists today, we'll send out information if you are interested in partnering and engaging, whether it's sites, resources, transportation. Many hands make the work lighter. So thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Marvin. We really appreciate you sharing the great work that you guys are doing, and we hope to replicate that more. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Chris Steed, who will introduce our next speaker.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Steed. I'm the president of the Fullerton Foundation, and I'm also here as the chair of the South Carolina Grantmakers Network. Before we introduce our next speaker, I do want to point out Mike Adams put a great suggestion into the chat box about working with local employers to have shots provided to their workers. So please take note of that. I'm pleased to be able to introduce Reverend Kylon Middleton, who I imagine is known to many of us on the call. He's the pastor at Mount Zion AME Church in Charleston. He's a longtime educator and calls himself retired, but he's a newly elected member of the Charleston County Council. And I imagine that if you had any real visions of retirement, that position on county council has taken up a tremendous amount of your time. Recently, Reverend Middleton was featured in Time Magazine for his work in the community as it relates to vaccination. So Reverend Middleton, thank you for being with us. The microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Chris, and to Naomi and everyone who is here today, to Ms. Murphy and Marvin Neal, my homeboy. I still have a house in Pawleys Island, so I consider myself still a resident Georgetonian, although I'm back in Charleston. And definitely, I'm a member of a fraternity, sorority, Eastern Star, Masons, and all of those groups. And I am a pastor, right? And so the faith community must, I recognized early, particularly as it related to the challenge and needs that I saw that prompted me to, kind of take up stake in this project, the fact that there were members of my congregation who were doubting, hesitant. I was hesitant, in the very beginning myself. I must tell the truth. I did not necessarily sign up immediately, particularly around December, November, when things seemed to be, just completely, just a shroud of doubt that continued to creep from Washington all the way to Charleston, right? And so, the entire nature of the vaccine and its rollout created hesitancy, particularly among Black people who historically can remember as it relates to vaccines and trials and medications administered to communities of people and or other sorts of antidotes being withheld. So we have a natural distrust automatically that has been passed down from generation to generation. And so as I started polling my members, talking to them, as I started interacting with my brother fraternity members in Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and or talking with my mother and the AKAs, and talking with I'm vice president of the Panhellenic Council here, talking to other Greek, Black letter, Greek lettered fraternities and sororities, and the Masons and Eastern Stars, I started recognizing in the Black community, particularly, that there were more individuals who seemed not to want to take it. And so at some point, I then woke up. I became woke. Even my son, who's 24 years old, was extremely hesitant, which then shocked me because, again, as a parent, he was always vaccinated. He was always exposed to, whatever medical sort of recommendations that made it better for his life and his livability or his health to be primary. And so I came from a perspective recognizing that that we needed God and we needed medicine, right? And so I would then start preaching a different gospel from the time, looking at the numbers we had. We lost many of our members personally in our church. And so particularly of the coronavirus, and definitely it devastated us. We went through that season along with everyone else from about June all the way through September or October. And if I was not planning a funeral, we were at a graveside. It was extremely exhausting. And so I recognized that as a pastor, I had to roll up my sleeve and I had to get it. I had to get the shot. So I got it. We then started trying to figure out, well, who can we target? And so we started looking at those outer line communities, those settlement communities. So here in the Mount Pleasant area of Charleston County, Old Village, Scanlonville, Green Hill, 2 Mile, Hungry Neck, Benning, Snowden, 6 Mile, 7 Mile communities, Hamlin, Phillips Community, 10 Mile, getting those folk from their communities literally to our vaccination site. We partnered with East Cooper Hospital in order to provide those particular doses, shots and arms of the vaccine. And then the rural communities, again, on the other side of Charleston County, Wadmalaw, Johns Island, James Island, Red Top, Adams Run, Hollywood, Edisto, through Charleston County Council, right? So you have to use all your resources in order to try to to leverage encourage whatever is necessary for everyone to have advantage. So Charleston County then partnered with FEDER, and we'll talk about FEDER in a minute, in order to provide in those communities. And then we decided to broaden our outreach. My beloved friend Clemente Carlos Pinckney, who was murdered in the Mother Emanuel tragedy, represented District 45, Senate District 45, which encompasses Colleton County, Jasper County, and Hampton and those small counties. So we decided to kind of branch also into the areas of Allendale, Fairfax, Estill, Ridgeland, Roundow, Walterboro, in order to Parker's Ferry, in order to really provide access to these shots in arms for individuals who didn't have access. They couldn't go to the big sites. They couldn't travel as far, to receive. And then in many of these places, it's a healthcare desert because they don't have a hospital or clinic or whatever the case is. The nearest one may be 30, 40, 50 miles away from where they live. So definitely bringing mobile units like Palmetto Palace, FEDER, these individuals, these entities, clinics, these providers who we used to look down on, right? No one wanted to go to St. James Santee. We all want to go to Tidelands, or we want to go to MUSC or Roper, St. Francis, or the big hospital systems that seemed to give us a rite of passage, right? And folk really started looking down on FEDER, clinics like FEDER. But during the pandemic, looking at the equity issue, it was clinics like FEDER and Yolanda Gibbs and the Palmetto Palace, which is a mobile health unit that recognized that they had the capacity, and they started. I mean, it was a personal mission to get out there and make certain that the access to the vaccine was available, particularly to communities of color and the underserved and those individuals who could not get to it. It is about knowledge. It is about trust. And it is about access, recognizing that we have voices. So as a pastor, beyond just, I'm telling people of the love of Jesus, but I'm also recognizing that Jesus preached a social gospel. He dealt with the needs of the people at the time. Before he began preaching his Sermon on the Mount, he made them a fish sandwich, and he began to feed their physical bodies. If they were housing insecure, he made certain that they had homes, right? He didn't have a home, but he made certain that they had a home. And so we are so aware that beyond preaching in the textual commentary in the canonical scriptures, we must also begin preaching a gospel that we have to get this vaccine, right? Because this vaccine is safe and it is effective. And we recognize that when the Johnson & Johnson sort of pause occurred, that would create additional hesitancy. Only about 140 million Americans have already been vaccinated. And so that goes to tell us that we still have about 200 million people out there that still need to be vaccinated. And this is everybody, red, yellow, black and white, rich, poor, on every spectrum, but particularly those who are underserved. We are still trying to, break the crack in the hesitancy through reminding them that, that some people are looking at, the nature of the vaccine. Well, will it give me the coronavirus if I take it, like the flu shot? There are these myths and these sort of people believe things that they don't even know. So you have to educate them. The effects of the vaccine. Well, if I take the shot, it's going to make me sick. I heard people, their arms were about to fall off. Well, no, I took it and I'm still up, moving, and certainly we have to begin to help them recognize that there are some certain things that you can anticipate, but after a day or so, those things will go away. So having individuals talk about their experiences, so it's not demystifying it, so it's not so anonymous and ominous, and so we can begin to share in commonalities in our experiences. Yes, I may have had a chill, or yes, I may have had soreness, or whatever the case is, but after a few days that did go away. So helping people recognize that those are common, and it certainly is not a unique thing to themselves. And so when looking at barriers, vaccine access and how we are addressing them, certainly initially having enough providers, because again, there were individuals who didn't want to go. And not to say that, I mean, it's a judgment, right? And it's a value. So, I mean, you're having these big sweeping vaccination clinics at coliseums and big sweeping vaccination clinics in places that people can, readily access. But there are, we have to always be equitable and just. Who's thinking about those individuals who are housing insecure, or those individuals who don't have transportation? They can barely even get off of their, the barrier islands or their indigenous settlement areas. And so, we had to recognize that from time to time, we have to take the vaccine to the people, recognizing that churches are everywhere in their communities. And so through the 7th Episcopal District of the AME Church, our bishop, under his leadership, partnered with Walgreens. So several AME churches started offering those particular doses through Walgreens as a provider. And then resources, certainly through the I Got It campaign that was referenced through the Time Magazine article, that was a big bump, right? Time Magazine, saw, what was happening here in Charleston, and they began to amplify the message. Well, that's Time Magazine, but, we have to have marketing materials enough to have billboards so that individuals who are in rural communities who may not read Time Magazine can just look up and see, some trusted person on their billboard. Commercials. Many of you may have seen me on a commercial on BET or on MSNBC or whatever the case is, through funds that were provided through DHEC. We were able to run TV spots. I got it. And giving that positive message from a trusted voice to individuals who will receive that message. And even in the midst of watching their regular television programming, when they begin seeing the pastor saying, look, I got it, I encourage you to get it. And that may have resonated with some people, and that may drive them to seek places where they can begin to receive the shot. And then lastly, I do feel that there is hope for the future, right? Because all of us are here in this virtual space having this conversation. I see somebody say, preach, sir. I'm trying not to preach, but I'm just trying to, I'm telling you, it's a different gospel now. We have to be urgent. We have to be passionate. We have to be excited in the sense that with every shot we get in the arm, we're saving somebody's life. We will never reach herd immunity, particularly here in South Carolina. In the Post and Courier this morning, there was a front page story on it. And so we'll never, because the rate of the vaccine, we have more supply than demand now of vaccine. And so we have to get people who are still on the fence. We have to move them. And so, yeah, I'm preaching. That's my gospel now, that we have to get this vaccine. And so through your efforts, through our continued conversations, through our collaborative partnerships, through our belief, right? Not belief in whatever, whoever, whatever, but our belief in humanity and our commonality and solidarity in the fact that in this nation, in order for us to truly go back to whatever we consider to be normal, we have to receive this coronavirus vaccination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Middleton. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like I might get a get out of jail free card from church next week, because I have been preached to. And you'll see several amens, Reverend, in the chat box. One of them from a devoted Lutheran, for the record.
I went to seminary, so
wonderful. Reverend Middleton, thank you for all that you're doing. I'm going to turn it back over to Naomi, who will move us to the next part of our conversation today.
Great. Yeah. And I want to echo Chris's sentiments and say that we will share more specific information about the things that Reverend Middleton talked about today. So, for people looking for ideas for their community or looking to support the great work that he's doing, either through resources or through partnership, we certainly want to leave that opportunity open. So next, we are going to be hearing from a partnership with a local hospital system and a church from the Low Country area. So I am here to introduce Ashley Hildreth, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. She's the Corporate Director of Quality and Patients and the Patient Safety Officer at Beaufort Memorial Hospital, where she's worked since 2003 in a variety of roles. She has a Master's of Science in Nursing and has won numerous awards with her work, including the Nurse Leader of the Year. Pastor J.A. Moore is a former Marine with 27 years of service. Thank you very much, Pastor. And a financial executive of 17 years. He's currently the pastor at Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Seaside. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to them to share with us about the great partnership and work that they are doing together.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us both. If it's okay with Pastor Moore, I thought I would just start quickly on the timeline at Beaufort Memorial, kind of ahead of the vaccine planning, and then kind of join him in with our partnership and let him finish out his work. His work has been amazing, and we've been most appreciative of his partnership. So just a brief background, as the first hospital in this call, we realized that vaccination was going to be kind of a pivotal point in our fight against COVID, and I think we may have gone into it a little bit naive. We had a lot of plans and a lot of ideas about how to get vaccines out, none of which were that people maybe didn't want it. I think that in the beginning, we made these plans and assumed that the distribution would be equitable, only to learn that that's not exactly how it happened. So a couple of things that we did, we immediately opened a clinic on site, moved some resources over from nursing perspective, front desk perspective, but realized very quickly that the way to get a vaccine was a little bit cumbersome. So going through the federal portal of VAMS, understanding that you had to have an email and you had to have the technology to be able to do that, that you had to be in an area where you were able to have internet access. So just a lot of things that we didn't look at first. Immediately we realized that we did have some challenges. We had that technology challenge. We had challenges with access, with people being able to get a ride even to come into town to get this vaccine. Definitely some knowledge barriers as well, as everybody has already pointed out. So one of the first things that we did is we stood up a call center so that we could have people, as they called our hospital operators and said, how do I get a vaccine? They could immediately transfer them over to a call center where we could take their information. And we realized quickly that we needed to stand up a different scheduling system. So we created an internal scheduling system so that people could circumnavigate the federal VAMS, waiting for the email, going through the process of being able to get signed into VAMS. A couple of other things that we did is we realized as well that we needed to have some drive-through clinics. So we held a few drive-through clinics, but it struck us about halfway through the very first one that we did that the demographic of the patients who were driving through to get these vaccines and the same demographic of people who were coming to our clinics didn't match the population that Beaufort Memorial represented. And so we realized very quickly that there definitely was a disparity there. And so we really started reaching out. One of the first things we did is we reached out to our own employees. So reached out to some of our African American, some of our Spanish American employees, and just said, tell us what you're hearing. What concerns do you have? What are you hearing when you go home and talk to your family members about getting this vaccine? What's your grandmother saying? And so we really just sat down and did some focus groups and said, what do we need to do? What can we do? What are we missing? How can we come together and figure out how to get our population vaccinated? We also provided that same information to our operators. Again, we had a lot of people answering phones and they were getting a lot of really tough questions. So we spent a lot of time working through question and answers and frequently asked questions and making sure that anybody who answered the phone at Beaufort Memorial was able to dispel some of those myths, was able to give some alternative suggestions on how someone could get vaccinated. We did reach out to some local businesses. We realized that a lot of our people who needed this vaccine were in the food and bev industry. They worked at our water plant. They were security officers at various places. And that, to someone else's point in this message, it doesn't always work in a 9-to-5 setting. So we increased the hours of our clinic. We did some weekend clinics so that we could help with that. We went on site to a lot of those locations, took the vaccine with us, took all the paperwork with us. Our chief medical officer went to a lot of those events with us so that he could be there to answer questions. We also realized as we looked around that a lot of our employees who were helping with this were not of color. And so we really reached out to those employees who were vaccinated and who could help us bridge those gaps and said, would you be willing to help us with this effort so that everyone can see that you're on board with this? We created badges that people could wear to show that they were vaccinated. And so it was interesting as people saw some of their coworkers vaccinating, that they could have those, elevator conversations about what made you make this decision to vaccinate and what do you need from us so that we can get that done. I think the last part of our efforts came probably a little later than we had wished, but we realized that we had a lot of our patients. We are in the low country, pretty rural in some of our areas, and we definitely had a lot of homebound patients that couldn't get vaccinated. So we reached out to Palmetto Breeze, which is a local transportation service. We said, hey, we think we need to get out there and get people vaccinated. Can you help us come up with some routes? There obviously are some logistics with the vaccine that has to be in ultra cold freezer, and then once reconstituted can only last for 6 hours. So can you help us map some routes? We reached out to our home health agencies, our Meals on Wheels, our local clinics, so the Good Neighbor Clinic, the Volunteers of Medicine, just really reached out and said, tell us about some patients that are having trouble getting to us so that we can go to them. We worked with our local EMS agency. We helped train the paramedics, and also our county had been very involved and said, we'll provide transportation for you. We can send an officer with you. We even reached out to the local police department and said, tell us about some people in the community that you work closely with who are, may have trouble getting this vaccine. And so we put together a homebound program where a Beaufort Memorial nurse or a home health nurse in our agency come by, pick up the vaccine, and then the Palmetto Breeze route is pre-established for them so that we can be as efficient as possible. And we've continued at this point. We've done over 100 home vaccinations that way. The most important thing that I think we've done, though, is to reach out to our local religious leaders in our community, just as you guys have pointed out, and said, how can we help do this? So I had the distinct pleasure of being invited by Pastor Moore to come do a radio broadcast with him. And he began telling us about some of the work that he was already doing. So he was definitely way on top of all of this and much faster to the field than we were. So I'll turn it over to Pastor Moore to let you guys hear the wonderful work that his congregation and his local clergy did to help get these vaccinations out.
Thank you, Ashley. And we thank Together for South Carolina for inviting us. I say to you all, I will try hard not to preach to you because I realize I'm a Baptist preacher. But I thank God and I give him honor that he has actually placed me in the place that I am, because I am absolutely convinced that we in America have overlooked Black and brown people for the most part. I believe the system that we are dealing with today, most of us already realize that when it was put together, it did not consider the plight of the poor and the left out. And so we have a registration system, the VAM system, actually does not include the fact and realize that there are many people who cannot go online. And I pastor in a community that it really has a lot of access deficits. And so that is what sprung us into action. As Ashley said, when Beaufort Memorial started doing the vaccinations, I would go, as a matter of fact, myself, my first, back in January, I went to their clinic, and I and two other Blacks were the only Blacks that I observed in that entire vaccination clinic. And I stayed there for the period of about about an hour. And so it alerted me to, my God, what are we doing? And how can we affect those persons that I pastor? And so therefore, we already had some structure in that we had the Shelburne Township Support Partnership that has been in existence for about 24 years. And it actually has a membership of sister churches, of which we have started a churches consortium whereby we communicate and we get information out. As Ashley said, we invited people to come on the radio station. Our church owns a radio station. And so we have used everything that is at our disposal to try to reach our community for vaccination purposes. And so in doing that, we have partnered with not only Buford Memorial, but we have a partnership with the Buford Jasper Comprehensive Health, of which we have helped to register people. We've had registration drives for about a month and a half every Saturday. I think last Saturday was the only Saturday that we didn't have registration drives, because we realized that in many cases, it was not that people did not want to take the vaccine, it was access. It was access to the system, if you will. And so we took our health ministry and we made them the COVID vaccination clinic team. And so we started registering people, because in so many cases, the VAM system would shut down. They would call and it would be prolonged conversations of trying to get registered. So we started doing registration where we partnered with Buford Jasper. They allowed us to modify their form, and then I health workers would just go while people are in their cars, get them to fill out registration. They didn't even have to write. Our people did the writing. DHEC came online afterwards and they did the same thing. And so we have actually gotten shots in the arms, about 1,200 people up to date that we've been responsible for getting shots in their arm. And it is all because of those partnerships that we've done. 3 weeks ago, I believe, Buford Memorial came out to our site, to the church, and they did a vaccination clinic, which was good. We have done things like that. We have actually gotten about 23 leaders in the community to where we have gotten them to do radio drops, spots, where their voices go throughout the community and people trust them. The sheriff of Jasper County has done one. We don't keep it local to the Shelburne Township. It is for everyone. And so it has been quite successful because we have a lot of people who simply care about other people and want to do the work of Jesus. And so that by and large is where we are. We already had the Healthy Churches Initiative that we started some years ago, came out of a grant from the Kresnick Foundation. And we started and continued that initiative. And so all of that has come together to actually benefit the effort of vaccinations. We talk about the councilman and pastor talks about preaching the social gospel. There has not been in over 1 year, there's not been a week where I did not make the effort to educate people on taking the vaccine. We started out at a great deficit nationally of leadership pertaining to the vaccine. And so we just got to try to make it up wherever we can, because as someone said earlier, Blacks in South Carolina die at twice the rate of our Caucasian friends. And so my thoughts were that we would have started out focusing on communities of color, but we didn't. So we make the best use of what we have. But as we go forward, and as we have gotten a lot of our community vaccinated, now we have to deal with those who are more hesitant. A radio program used to say, if you consider that there are over 500,000 people who have died of the virus, yet if you use logic, you would realize that nobody has died as a result of taking the vaccine. Johnson & Johnson caused us to pull that from the radio spots, because now we can no longer say that. But we do have to continue to strive to encourage people and persuade people to take that vaccine for the betterment of themselves, their families, and our society. So that's where we are. We thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pastor Moore. And we do have 2 minutes in your section, and I'd love to ask, what do you think with your folks was the most effective message for those who were concerned about getting the vaccine, scared to get it? What message do you think most resonated?
I think it was the fact of trying to cause people to look at, just think about the situation that we are in. Think about the number of people that has passed. Pastor Neal, I believe, made the statement. One of the pastors made the statement that they have been constantly at the grave site. So have we in some cases, but we have not had one person to succumb to that virus since its inception. And I believe the reason is because we started early on of trying to educate people of the dangers of the virus. And so when the vaccine came, it was a lot easier then for us to then actually make the argument. But I think the biggest and most successful thing that we've done is to get those leaders out of the different communities to come on and to actually make a radio drop of making the statement that they've taken the vaccine, it did not harm them, and now they encourage everyone else. I think that has been most successful.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your work. And it's just amazing to hear about the 1,200 people. Ashley, thank you for sharing your lessons learned and all the great work that Beaufort Memorial has done to reach out and partner and rethink. And so we're glad that you could join us today. Again, we'll share information for anybody who wants to replicate, support, or expand the work that's going there. We'll share that work. And so with that, I will pass it back over to my partner in crime, Chris Steed.
Thank you both so much. That was excellent information. We're going to move things from the low country up to the PB. I'm pleased to have with us today Carl Humphries. Carl is a fellow MSW. That's a Master's Prepared Social Worker, for those of you that didn't know. He's currently the CEO of Hope Health in Florence, where he's worked for 20 years. His former roles include social work focused on individuals and families with communicable diseases. He is currently currently a board member of Together SC, and we want to once again extend our appreciation to Ben Bullock and the team at Together SC for providing our technology today. Carl, we look forward to learning more about what you're doing in your neck of the woods.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you all for having me on today. I have a rule that apparently didn't get followed. I'm not supposed to follow preachers anytime that I'm doing a presentation, because it's impossible to follow what's been said today. And it's very inspirational. I want to thank all those who have already spoken. Hope Health is a federally qualified health center. And sometimes we use the term community health center. We use those terms interchangeably. And it was interesting and nice to hear the mention of several of our sister organizations throughout the state already on the call today. Fetter out of the Charleston area was mentioned. Franklin Fetter Health Center, St. James Santee, and then also Beaufort Jasper were all mentioned earlier in this webcast. And so there's an appreciation, I think, on behalf of many of the panel members for what a fairly qualified health center does, and our history of bringing services to people who are in need, and with a particular focus on bringing services to the African-American community. And, there's so much going on in community health centers across the state as it relates to the vaccine. And Hope Health is playing a small part in that. I know to our west is Care South, and they're doing incredible things with mobile units, and their numbers in terms of vaccines are extremely high. And so there's a lot of good things going. In fact, there was a feature in USA Today about fairly qualified health centers, and I'll read a quote from that article. It says, FQHCs offer health care to underserved communities, and as people of color continue to suffer disproportionately from the virus, the centers could be essential in vaccinating hard-hit populations. And so to that end, the federal government has invested a significant amount of money across the country to fairly qualified health centers to continue to ramp up our vaccination efforts. And I'm just real proud of what the FQHCs across the state are doing. Here in Florence, in particular, we have we put together a virtual town hall. One of our board members is Teresa Myers-Irvin, who is the first African-American mayor of Florence and the first female mayor of Florence. And she was a moderator for the question and answer period. Terry Alexander, South Carolina State Representative Terry Alexander, was the MC of the event. So we brought African-American leaders to the table to address the community about all the things that have already been talked about on this call, dealing with the myths around the vaccine, answering questions related to vaccine hesitancy, and getting those trusted African-American voices in front of our community was extremely important for us. Here within Hope Health, we do a number of things, and I hope it's guided by a question that's asked in Scripture. I'm not a pastor, but since I'm following two pastors, I'll share this question that's posed in 1 John 3:17. It says, "But whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him?"
Amen.
When I came across this question some years ago, it was very convicting for me. I was like, wow, because I grew up hearing people talk about, people wanted to point to scriptures like, well, if you do not work, you should not eat. And we emphasize scriptures like that instead of the one that I just quoted to you. And there's so many more passages in scripture that deal with how we attend to the poor and needy. And so when I saw this verse, it was very convicting for me. And it's my prayer that at Hope Health, we're guided by this verse of scripture. And so, we're making every effort to reach our employees and our patients through newsletters, staff meetings, local articles, the local medical society, our website and social media. but it's important that our employees, and a majority of our employees at Hope Health are African American, they're able to communicate to patients as they come in. Patients can come in and see a face that looks like them and someone that they can relate to. Thankfully, many of our providers are also African American, but when that means something, whenever they can stand before the patients and say, "Hey, look, I've done my work on this. I can tell you the pros of what it means to be vaccinated," and for people to be able to stand behind that by saying, "I myself have been vaccinated." So we're encouraging our own staff to be able to get vaccinated first, so that they can then rightfully send that message to the patients. And we're taking a page out of Care South's book, our partner again to the west, where they have incentivized, done some incentivization to their employees to get vaccinated. 59% of our patients at Hope Health are African American, but 69% of the vaccines that we've delivered have been to African Americans. That's very important to me, because early on we said, let's not have a situation here where our African American patients are not getting access to the vaccine in equal proportions, at least, if not better, than our white patients are. And so I was very happy to see that statistically we're vaccinating a higher percentage of our African American patients, and that was very encouraging to me. And I think it's due to some of the efforts that we discussed earlier. As you surely won't be surprised, most of our vaccines at this point have gone to individuals who are 60 and older. We will see that percentage drop as we begin to open it up more to all ages. And we're making every effort to reach underserved and rural communities. So we have vaccination sites in Florence, Lake City, Timmonsville, Francis Marion, a little itty bitty town called Greeleyville. I don't know, raise your hand if you've been to Greeleyville, South Carolina, Kingstree, Manning, and Orangeburg. And so these are some of the places in which we are administering vaccine. To date, we've vaccinated over 4,000 individuals. Honestly, it should be a lot higher than that. We're working hard, but we need to do better. There are many of the health centers around the state who are way ahead of us in terms of the number of people vaccinated. But that's the kind of competition we need. We need to be working to beat each other at how many people we can vaccinate. We use Moderna, the 2-dose Moderna vaccine. The second dose is 28 days after the first one. In terms of resources, and I can make these available to Ben at SC Together SC, and others to share if anybody's interested. But there are a couple of resources that are fairly new. One is Greater Than COVID. It's a resource called, it's a campaign called Greater Than COVID, and one also the Black Coalition Against COVID. There's videos with 50 frequently asked questions, and they're African-American healthcare leaders providing the answers to these questions, these commonly asked questions about the vaccines. So again, just another resource that you all can use as you continue to do this good work. And I will share those resources with Ben so that they can be made available. Finally, as I conclude, I mentioned that federally qualified health centers have gotten funding across the nation, and here in South Carolina, specifically related to COVID vaccine. And we're looking to try to at some unique ways that we can partner with other nonprofits. We're talking with Together SC now about some ways that we can move some of that funding to them that would then allow them to teach and utilize nonprofit organizations, particularly African-American led nonprofit organizations across the state, in helping us get the word out about the vaccine. So I think it's important that we have a measure of humility as we approach this and realize we don't have all the answers. And there are folks out there who are doing grassroots work every day who are on the streets. They know the folks, and how can we partner with them in such a way that helps us get the word out and help us motivate people to come in to our place and get vaccinated. Again, thank you guys for this opportunity to talk today. It probably should have been a number of other folks who are doing better than we are across the state with COVID vaccine, but I'm honored to be a part of it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Carl, thank you so much for being part of the panel today. And you got some kudos from many people, including Rick Foster in the chat box. So take a second to read those and pat yourself on the back. I'm going to turn it back over to Naomi, but before I do, this is the last opportunity I'll have to hold the microphone. And I just want to let all of you know how important this work is and how impressed I am to see what is happening throughout the state. And I appreciate those that are speaking today being willing to share their stories, because I know in our local community here in Gaffney and other parts of South Carolina, we're not always as lucky to have excellent leadership like you guys have represented here today. So thank you for sharing your stories. And now I'll pass it back to Naomi.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'd like to echo that, Carl. Thank you so much. And we will certainly connect you with Brenda and her folks, because it seems like there might be opportunity for partnership just on the call. So with that, I would like to introduce our, as Vince would probably like me to say, save the best for last. But we've had so many amazing speakers, that would be hard to say, although Vince does an incredible job at Prisma Health. So Vince Ford is our final speaker of the day. He's the Senior Vice President with Prisma Health. His work focuses on improving community health services through a variety of innovations. He serves his community through his local school board and is a lifetime member of the NAACP. He's won a number of awards throughout his career for his dedicated community service, and he has applied that passion, that award-winning passion, to his work at Prisma Health. So we're very excited to have him share with us today about what they have done around vaccines. So Vince, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I appreciate that. And I especially want to give a shout out to Rick Foster and to my great leader, President Murphy, as well as everyone else on the call. I really appreciate everyone. Most of us probably are aware that in 1966, Dr. Martin Luther King was at the American Medical Association in Chicago. And he said something that I think that many of us have stood up or used plenty times as a quote. He says, of all the injustices and inequalities in the world, the most inhumane is to deny someone quality health care. Unfortunately, in the country, we have been working to try to eliminate that as an issue throughout our communities. That has been going on pre-COVID. Obviously, it has been multiplied and magnified during COVID. And I believe that problems coming out of COVID are going to be just as bad coming into COVID, all of those chronic health issues. I had a chance a few years ago to spend a day with Maurice Ashley, who is a grandmaster chess player. And I remember that we were at a school, and I'm a chess enthusiast myself. And so I couldn't wait to spend the day with him. And we were at a school, and he was playing chess with about 10 different people. And he was sharing commentary at the same time. And I said to him, I said, Maurice, maybe I don't understand. I learned to play chess where you do a few things. One is you control the middle of the board. You play offense rather than play defense. You're quiet and reflective. You try to do 3 or 4 moves in advance. And he said to me, standing in front of a group of people, man, forget all that. And I says, okay, well, tell me, what do I do? He says, I just solved a problem that's right in front of me. And I think our responsibility is, as we deal with COVID and other healthcare issues, we've gotten to a point where we, and I'll just use the term, forgotten to solve the problems that are right in front of us. As we struggle throughout our state to take the COVID vaccine to the most vulnerable and throughout our community, we wanted the community to adjust to us versus the system adjusting to the people. And what we have to do is make the appropriate adjustments from a system perspective to meet the needs of the community. What does that mean? That means that we have to do it on Saturdays, and in some occasions on Sundays, then we have to do it. If we have to do it after 4 o'clock when some doctor's offices close or when services are not traditionally offered, then we have to do it. We have to adjust to our community so that we can provide this life-saving vaccine to our community. I shared with a group not too long ago that, in my opinion, I think that we really need to make a major adjustment. I'll give you an example. When I was a little boy growing up in Allen Benedict Court and on Reed Street in the project, me and my mom, I used to go outside in the park and play ball all the time. And I remember there was really one thing other than darkness that would stop us from playing ball. And that was when we heard this bell, and the bell was that of an ice cream truck. And even in the midst of shooting the ball or catching a football or even a baseball, once we heard that bell, we went out of our minds. We run to the house and say, Mama, 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 I need 50 cents or 25 cents, whatever it was. And then we would run back to the truck and eat ice cream. And that was the best thing going. I had to bring Mom back one as well. Well, why am I sharing that? Because I believe that we have some nooks and crannies throughout South Carolina that don't have access to us, that we've got to take access to them. I know, Ms. Murphy, I know that you have branches all over the state and we do a phenomenal job with that, but we've got to partner with organizations like that. And we've got to even drive down streets to ensure that we don't miss out on anyone. I really believe that after all of this work that we're doing throughout the state, we're still going to miss about 10% of the people who need the vaccine only because they don't have access to it, because we're not going directly to them. I heard I was on a call recently with someone from McLeod, and they were sharing how they had the mobile unit out in Darlington County. And there was a gentleman who walked 2 miles because he really wanted the vaccine. This was early in the process. That shouldn't be. We've got to take that vaccine to him. We've got to go down those streets. We got to go to those nooks and to those crannies and make sure that it happens. So I'm convinced that with all the technology that we have, think about it, we struggled with Wi-Fi and with the internet and the VAM system. With all the technology that we have, we can send a satellite out into space. We can actually predict the date and time of the eclipse to the minute. I remember leaving work and going home and standing outside with my little glasses on, and in the minute I could tell they told us when the eclipse was coming, and they were accurate. But now we can't get the internet to certain areas and certain regions. We can't get the vaccine to them. Come on. So I'm convinced now then more than ever that it's not even about skill, because we know how to do it. It's really about will. Are we willing to do it? So here's some of the things that we've done. We've stood up virtual town hall meetings in our area. We met with pastors, but we found that it's even more important. And I all respect to all my pastor brothers on the call, but what we learned is it's the first lady of the church, particularly in the African-American church, because she's viewed as a mother figure. And so we had a call with the first ladies of the church in parallel to the call with the ministers of the church. And we asked them to be influencers. And I'll tell you what that means as I conclude. We asked them to be ambassadors, and how important it was for the pastor and the first lady, particularly in the African-American church, to stand up and be and influencers. And so as we do in those town hall meetings, those virtual meetings, a couple of things that we share with the community. One is we're not trying to push the vaccine on you. If you've decided not to take it, we understand. Make whatever decision that you make in your own enlightened self-interest. And so if you decided it's not for you, hey, we understand. Our goal is for you to try to listen and become educated and informed. And we believe that if you do, then you'll make a different decision. So I'll give you a personal story. A week before Christmas, my wife and I were on a call with our 2 kids, a son in Tampa and a daughter in Memphis. And so I had to tell them that they could not come home unless they did certain things, like be tested before they left their town, and they were going to be quarantined once they got home, a number of things, long story short. And so I started reflecting on that. And if I go back a few months, all the way back to October, November, I was probably, even though I work in healthcare, I was probably a no about the vaccine. For myself personally, I was probably a no. I started learning and listening to physicians and other people, and I became a maybe. I continued to study and listen, and then I became a probably. And then it was that call that I realized that my kids, for the first time in my life, could not come home for Christmas. And I said to myself, that won't be next Christmas, because now I'm going to move to definitely getting the vaccine. So, because my why became, I want to spend more time with my family, and I don't ever want that to happen again. And so we share with the community, we understand the medical mistrust, and that's legitimate. People, there has been medical mistrust, particularly throughout the African-American community and the healthcare providers. That is legitimate. It is true. Every call I've been on, someone has brought up Tuskegee. Every call I've been on, someone has brought up medical mistrust. Every call I've been on, someone has said, hey, they created that vaccine in less than a year. Every call I've been on, someone has mentioned the previous administration in Washington and their concerns about the vaccine. So we try to tell people the truth. And if you go, I'll just take one of them, Tuskegee, for instance. Tuskegee, they withheld medicine from the African-American men. In this situation, we are trying to provide it. So it's not really a true comparison. However, we certainly understand and respect your concern about the vaccine and about the medical and healthcare community. So we need trusted people like our ministers, like our elected officials, like the NAACP, like community neighborhood association leaders, like the first ladies of the church, et cetera. I can go on and on, because we want them to stand up publicly and become an influencer. And so I'll end with this. And at every call, we try to ask them to do 4 things, consider doing 4 things. The first thing is consider taking the vaccine and talk to your physician, talk to a trusted person, your pastor, first lady, Ms. Murphy, or anyone else. Talk to someone that you respect and trust. Do not get your information off the internet or your cousins or your friends. Get factual information from someone who's going to lead you in the right direction, and then make your own decision. I respect that. And so we asked them to consider taking the vaccine. Number 2, we asked them to take a picture of them taking the vaccine because we want you to share it with other people, because again, you are an influencer. And so we want you to share it with members of your congregation or members. And this is number 3. We ask that you have a family conversation and share the fact that you've taken the vaccine. And here's a picture to prove that I've done it. But now let's have a factual conversation about the vaccine and not the kind of stuff that I've heard. Many of us, if we pulled together all the things that we've heard that is not only inaccurate, but grossly inaccurate, we could write a book on it. And so we try to get people the truth. And then the 4th thing is don't speak negatively about the vaccine. If you've chosen not to take it, we respect that, but don't convince someone else. I had to tell my son that. I don't want you saying anything negative that might influence my daughter. And so I said to him, hey man, he's 30 some years old. I said, well, if you've decided not to take it, I understand, but don't say anything negative that might influence your little sister from not wanting to take it. And so those are the things that we've asked. We've had great conversations. And so I shared with Pastor Jackson over at Brooklyn 4 things. I says either the vaccine or the virus. We're going to be confronted with one of those 2 issues at some point in our time. And or the 3rd V would be a ventilator. And that's something obviously we don't want anyone to be on. But if we take the vaccine, hopefully we can get to the point where the 4th V, we can get to go on some vacation real soon. I think we're this close to turning this around in our society. We're at a tipping point. And I think that if we can continue to vaccinate people at the right rate, I think we'll help to turn our society around real soon, even though the virus may be around beyond that. But I do think we're at a tipping point where we can really make a difference if we can get more people vaccinated. Thank you all for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Vince. We're so grateful to hear about your work. So I just wanted to leave it open. We do have a few more minutes. If anybody had any questions or comments Before we wrap up for the day, I'll open it up for a moment to ask questions, or if you have one that you didn't ask or put in the chat box, go ahead and put it in the chat box now. So if we, for those of you who are interested, you can follow up. My information is on the registration page. So if you are interested in learning about this, we'll send out general information, but if you wanted to contact somebody specifically about the work that they're doing, or some partnership, or understanding how you might help resource or replicate their work, we will share that out. We hope that this is the beginning of many conversations to come. There is certainly a larger opportunity here to build partnership and trust in a larger healthcare context, right? We've seen through the pandemic and the vaccination efforts where we're at with medical trust, knowledge, trust, access. That's not just about the vaccine. It reflects a lot of other challenges. So that we're hoping through this, we could start to build more bridges and understanding in ways that we can partner. So I just see accolades for the speakers. I didn't see any more questions. So with that, I will just say thank you to everyone who tuned in today, and especially to our speakers for your passion and your dedication and all the work you've done to save lives in South Carolina. So thank you, everyone, and happy rest of your Tuesday. I hope everyone has a great day, and hopefully we'll see you soon to continue the conversation. Thanks.